unfold, where truth abides. From the mundane to the extraordinary, we'll explore it all. It's our territory. Call it what you want, we'll break a new ground, where ideas spark and insights abound. Call it what you want, we'll make our stand. In this podcast, we'll hand in hand. So tune in now, let's seize the day. Call it what you want, come what may. So tune in now, let's seize the day. Call it what you want, come what may. It's a podcast.
Hey everyone, it's TJ Miss T. I'm back with another episode about boy bands. I'm going to call this episode 2.5. Maybe it'll be 3, but 2.5, I'll call it that. Because I realized I forgot a few things. There's so much information about boy bands, I was bound to forget something. So, quick retraction. I had the wrong dates for the group of Take That. They were out from 90 to 95. I think I said 93 to 97. That was wrong. It was 90 to 95. And then they had broken up and they were still at the height of their career. Something else I want to bring up, which I did bring up briefly, was Canadian boy bands. I didn't really name any of them. So the first is the Moffats. They were a band of brothers. So similar to like Hanson, they had an older brother and then younger triplet brothers. They're actually 11 months apart. Crazy. So same thing like I mentioned before. They were out a few years, broke up, and they have not gotten back together. Another group who I really liked was Soul Decision. Lead singer was Trevor Guthrie, which he did an episode of Frosted Tips recently with Lance Bass, if you know about that podcast. It was him and 2 other guys. He pretty much did all the vocals. The other guys were just kind of like musicians in the background. Really great songs, really catchy songs like Faded and Ooh It's Kinda Crazy. Another group, which I heard of briefly recently, was Before Four. That's a pair of twin brothers and one of their friends. So they have 3 in that group. So Moffats is 4, Soul Decision have 3, Before Four have 3. And again, I bring that up because some people feel like boy bands should have 4 to 5 members. Another group that has 3, which I just heard of recently, partially thanks to Naomi from Dope Nostalgia, and I think something else that I read was the group called 3 Deep. They were out from late 90s to early 2000s. And they were considered a Canadian group because they did have a Canadian member named CJ Hoyer, who's now a producer. They had 2 Americans in the group, and you might know these names. Joshua Morrow, do you know that name? He's played now for 30 years Nick Newman on The Young and the Restless. I was shook when I heard that. I watched The Young and the Restless for about 12-ish years now. And then the other member was Eddie Cibrian. Does that name sound familiar? He is an actor and he's also married to Leanne Rimes. I cannot believe that they were in these groups. I never heard of it, but they never released their album in the US. So they're more known in Canada and Asia and stuff like that. So again, we have the Moffats, Soul Decision, Before Four, and 3 Deep. Another thing I forgot to mention, I did bring up briefly were documentaries. I brought up the Jacksons movie American Dream, which I said came out in the early 90s. The Osmonds, I did bring up a documentary that came out in the early 2000s in the UK. I didn't have the name of it though. The name was Being the Osmonds. And then I was doing some research and then they had another documentary that came out, which I have not watched yet. It's called Faith, Family, and Fame. And that came out about 9 months ago. That's why I haven't heard of it. I didn't see that on the YouTube listings. Another documentary that's been out for about 10 years is One Direction. They have one called This Is Us. Backstreet Boys, I've seen this one. It's called Show 'Em What You're Made Of, which is off of their In a World Like This album. That came out in 2013 on their 20-year anniversary. Really good documentary about them going back to their hometowns. They also briefly talk about the whole Lou Pearlman situation. So you get to know more about the guys and how they grew up. And then Jonas Brothers have one called Chasing Happiness, which came out when the reunion happened. I have not seen that yet either. One that I did see, which I very much enjoyed, appreciate the realness of it, was Lance Bass's documentary about the Boy Band Con, which was Lou Pearlman. If you want to know about Lou Pearlman, that's an X documentary. It is on YouTube. And he interviewed AJ was the Backstreet representative. And then they also had JC, Lance, I believe Chris also talked about it, the late Aaron Carter, Nikki DeLoach from Innocence, which was Lou's girl group. One of the members of C Note, I believe Ashley Parker Angel, they talked about Lou, how he basically screwed over all of his boy bands, but also, unfortunately, the elderly. So if you've not seen the Boy Band Con, please check that out. That came out, I believe, in 2017. And then I just found this out. There is a brand new Lou documentary coming out on Netflix, July 24th. It's called Dirty Pop, a playoff of the NSYNC song. I saw the preview of it. It seems to be a lot of the same recycled information, similar to the Boy Band Con. So I hope they're not just like copying it. I hope there is some new information. So like I said, that's coming out July 24th, Dirty Pop. I did see AJ did part of the interview. They had a couple of other people, but I didn't know who they were. So looking forward to seeing that. So that's the update on documentaries and movies. Like I said, I did bring that up briefly for the Jacksons and Osmonds, but there are other documentaries for boy bands if you want to know more about them. I did bring up Take That as well. I forgot to write down the names, but like I said, they had in the previous episode, they have 3 documentaries that are out on YouTube. Let me see what else. Oh, the last thing I forgot to bring up, who are the highest selling boy bands of all time? They did have a list on Wikipedia, but that was deleted. I've checked about 3 different websites and they all have different numbers and names. Based on what I've seen though, the highest selling boy band of all time, if you're counting this as a boy band, will be Backstreet Boys. The numbers fluctuate. I've seen 100 million to 140 million. I've heard personally from the guys 120 million. So I'm gonna go off of that. So Backstreet Boys is the highest selling of all time. Like I mentioned, been together 31 years straight. They are a worldwide group. Backstreet Boys go to all countries and tour. They were just in Saudi Arabia. What boy band goes to Saudi Arabia? Backstreet Boys. They had another boy band countdown, and they counted the Beatles. So like I said, some articles they count the Beatles, some they don't. They counted the Beatles as number 1 at 600 million, but all the other, I think there was 3 other articles, they all said Backstreet Boys at number 1. So number 2, I have the Jackson 5 at 100 million. Again, other articles have said 90 million, 100 million, but they're at number 2. I have New Kids on the Block at 80 million. Another article said 70 million. Another on the Wikipedia one, they mentioned the Bay City Rollers, which are a UK group. And again, numbers fluctuate from 80 to 90 million. And next on the list was the Osmonds with 77 million. Next is One Direction with 70 million. NSYNC also have 70 million. Next is Boyz II Men with 60 million. So they're the highest. Well, Jackson's will be the highest selling R&B group, R&B pop. But if you're talking about just straight up R&B, Boyz II Men are the highest selling with 60 million. This one was a bit confusing. So one list had Westlife at 55 million, and they didn't have Take That. But then another article I read had Take That, and said that both Take That and Westlife both have sold 55 million. So I'm gonna go off of that because Take That was pretty huge. Then next on the list is BTS with 38 million. And then finally, I have the Jonas Brothers with 17 million. So, and these numbers fluctuate. Like I said, Backstreet Boys, they've said 100 million to 140 million. I'm gonna stick with the 120 million. So those are considered the highest selling boy bands of all time. So this is it with my boy band part 2. I just wanted to add a few bits of information. There's one last thing I should bring up are the podcasts. I think I brought that up with Frosted Tips. Lance Bass, he just started season 2. He took a few month break off. And then AJ used to have a podcast with Cheryl Burke. So if you haven't seen that, they stopped that a couple years ago because that's when he was doing Dance with the Stars. And it was called Pretty Messed Up. They still have old episodes if you want to listen. He talked about his addiction and stuff like that. So current ones, like I said, are Frosted Tips with Lance Bass. And then Chris Kirkpatrick has one called Name Drop with Brian McFadden, who was an MTV VJ. So if you want to hear any boy band podcasts from actual boy banders, those are two of them, two of the guys from NSYNC. And that's it. Like I said, I just want to do a quick retraction for to take that information and talk about the documentaries, Canadian boy bands, highest selling ones. Again, if I left out any boy bands, because I'm sure I probably did, let me know. What are some of your favorites? And like I mentioned in the previous episode, tell me what your definition of boy band is. Because I told you mine, which I will repeat. Vocal harmony group, pop and or R&B. I don't consider pop rock boy bands. I don't think Blink-182. You know, I have my boy band brunch, and sometimes I get requests that are more rock. I don't consider them boy bands. Either pop and or R&B. It doesn't have to be 4 to 5 members. They don't have to dance. Just more about the vocals and, you know, the type of music, like love songs, things like that. So again, let me know what your definition is. We have our next episode coming up soon. And again, thank you guys so much for joining me on the Call What You Want podcast.